today I'm talking about whips. These things, whips, sticks, whatever you want to call them. And they are simply a training aid. And you need to know about negative reinforcement to understand the use of the whip properly. They should not be used in anger. And I can't think of any times I would use them as a positive punishment. However, as a training aid, they're extremely useful. There are many sorts of whips, as you can see. This one is a very firm whip. You should always try them on yourself. So that sometimes, if something's a little bit flighty on the whip, this is a little bit shorter, and it gives quite a nice firm feel, not too whippy. Lots of these ones are quite smart with shiny tops, actually very stingy. You put them on yourself and they're quite stingy, and I wouldn't really recommend those. This one has a sort of flappy bit on the end. I'm not quite sure of the purpose of that, except it makes people feel like it's quite nice. Sometimes you have a little hand on the end. It really doesn't make any difference, and actually I don't really like that flappy bit. Again, it's quite stingy, this whip. And this is the one I prefer. It's you don't have to have the tassel, you can take the tassel off, but it's soft enough, and yet it actually means something. It doesn't sting. So this is my preferred whip. So if I get on the horse, so just simply carrying your whip is a very neutral place. It doesn't actually do anything. It's a bit, as I say, like an extension of your arm, and so it just sits there. What you don't want to have is somebody inadvertently waving the whip around because they can't keep steady hands. It's a little bit like nagging with the legs the whole time because they can't have steady legs. And in fact, for a novice rider, if they can learn to keep the whip still and the rein still and the legs still, you're doing very well. And one of the things I teach people to do is to take their hand a little wider, put the whip just behind their leg like that, and see if they can keep it there while keeping a quiet contact. And that, if you like, would be like a number one. The whip is in position but not really doing anything. This is also useful if a horse is a little bit sensitive to the whip. You just leave it there. If you start wiggling it around, I would expect the horse to have a reaction or response to that. But if he's a little overreacted, just keeping it there. You can do it with one hand. You can groom him a little bit with it, stroke him with the whip, show him it's really nothing to be afraid of, until he gets so used to it that he doesn't react to you moving it around. Very, very important you do that. You don't want your horse overreactive to the whip. And incidentally, that may not be because he's been beaten to within an inch of his life. We had a little pony that we broke in, that we bred, never had anything bad happen to him, was terrified of the whip. He got used to it and was then very nice, and a nice sensitive horse, but not oversensitive. So just being able to groom your horse with the whip, and then just being able to place the whip there, keeping it nice and steady in walk, trot and canter. As I say, if you're doing that, you're doing very, very well. The next thing is to use your whip, so like any aid, it can go from 0 to 10. 0, not having the whip at all. 1, you've just got it here. 1.1, you start to put it on him. And then 2, a little tap. And it's so much better to give a little tap like this than the constant kicking, shoving, pushing that I see some novice riders do. It's like they say, oh, they're not good enough to have a whip, we'll just let them thump away. I think that must be so unpleasant for a horse to be permanently kick, kick, kick. And then if you've got the reins doing stuff as well, or the rein is doing this and pulling the horses in, I should think it must be like a very slow torture to the horse. So you can give a leg aid, the horse doesn't respond, you tap him with the whip, and I say this is quite a light little tap, he should respond to that within a couple of taps. So you can just increase that. Now I don't want to use a very strong whip here, you can hear it, it's just a little tap tap. Usually having the tap quicker rather than louder is better. And I'm going to put it on my leg as well, so that you can see I've got a boot here. So I can, whoops, quite a sharp whack leg, and this would be about 7 or an 8 on the scale, and 10, because you might need it, is up here, whack. Very rarely need that, but it should be in your armoury, because if the horse knows you have 10, you very, very rarely use it. You get to about 4 or 5 and he goes, okay, I get the message. If you're like a bit frightened of using the whip, like, I'll use it, but I don't want him to gallop off, well, you're giving very mixed messages. So it's important that you're clear with the whip, that you use it with dexterity, with sensitivity. You can be quiet with the whip, you can animate him a little bit, and then have your hands back to neutral where it becomes 1. In other words, it's sitting there but you're not using it. A very, very important skill to acquire.